Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick and today we're going to have a little chat about retro games and why oftentimes I tend to prefer them over more modern titles. Okay, so I want to start out by saying I'm by no means against modern games and modern gaming. I'm not here to tell you retro games are the only type of game you should be playing, or anything like that. There are lots of modern AAA games that I absolutely adore. I really just want to make this video to talk about the merits that I see in retro games. Recently for me, but this video is going to come out probably a couple months after the news actually broke, but recently it was announced that Best Buy would stop selling physical media. Now, aside from the obvious reasons why this is incredibly stupid from a consumer standpoint, I think it's just another move that shows where large companies' heads are at when it comes to older technology and older games specifically. There's a little bit of a consensus among game development companies, and even among a large portion of gamers, that if it's not pushing the limits of the current hardware, that it's not really worth your time or your money. We see this in game reviews all the time. The fact that a lot of outlets will take points off of a game if the graphics aren't up to par with the latest Call of Duty just shows that the game development world is always trying to chase the most modern, most beautiful experience possible. And despite my decidedly negative take on this attitude, that's not always a bad thing. It's good to push the medium forward, and I want advancement and improvement, though I think it often comes at the detriment of older games. Even games that were released just like 2 months ago, or all but forgotten by the gaming zeitgeist, which is always looking for the next big release. But I think that single-minded focus on the new, shiny thing is ultimately harmful. It's not just a good idea to preserve old games for history's sake, though that is incredibly important. These are also just great games. They're entire worlds crafted to allow you to escape from your real life for an hour or two and live out an adventure, or just enjoy masterfully crafted level design and mechanics. Okay, so I'm just actually in the middle of editing the video that you're watching, and I realized that I kind of missed a pretty important point as to why people kind of enjoy playing retro games and why it's kind of important to play retro games outside of just the fact that we want to preserve these games for history's sake. I was watching a video last night by amazing creator, The Book Leo. If you're not familiar with that channel, go check it out. She's great, awesome, love that channel. But I was watching their video about dark academia, and I realized that in the same way that classic books are often used to kind of teach concepts and teach people about writing, and oftentimes, you know, you have to read them in your English classes because you can learn a lot from these old books. I think as game enthusiasts and people who like playing games and like this medium, people who are passionate about this, it is valuable to go back and learn about where all of the mechanics and all of the formulas and all of the things that make games fun and engaging, where all of those things came from. And you can really step through the progression of these mechanics when you go through retro games. And I think that is actually very important and a very important part of being a game fan. Obviously, you don't have to go home and, you know, do homework to play video games. Just play whatever games are fun, and ultimately it's a hobby. It should never be work. But in the same way that a lot of people generally shy away from the older kind of classics in literature, I think people tend to have that same attitude with video games and retro games, and I think that there's a lot of value to be had there in learning about the history of these games that we love so much, and of just gaming as a whole and how everything kind of came to be in gaming. I think there's a lot of value in that. And yeah, I just think I just wanted to add that in here because I didn't realize this when I was actually writing the script, but it's worth your time, just like it is worth your time to go back and read more foundational works like Frankenstein or Jane Eyre, and you might actually be surprised by how much you like these things, regardless of the fact that you kind of have this notion that old games are old and ew, they can't possibly be as good as modern games, when that's not true. And obviously gaming is still a very young art form and a very young medium, but there is still a lot of progression that's been made. It's a very fast-moving medium, and we've made a lot of progress, and you can really see that when you move from console to console to console, different PC games, different generations from different years. It is very interesting to see the advancements, see the improvements, and experience them in a way that obviously you can't experience them the exact same way that the people of the time would experience them. And, it's the same with books, but I think you can get an idea, and I think you can experience it a little bit better because we're closer to those times. We are closer to the world that those were made in. Whereas if you're reading Jane Eyre, it was written in, I don't know, like 1800s or something, 1900s. That's a lot more removed than the 1980s, right? So, yeah, I thought that was an interesting point and an important point to make for this video. But yeah, I'll let you get back to the video. I personally use retro games as a bit of an escape from life and work and the usual day-to-day activities I need to get done. Now, this doesn't mean I'm unhappy with my life or anything. I think this is a very normal thing to desire. Humans love telling and listening to stories, and really great stories throughout history have always been the ones that we can get wrapped up in and feel like we're a part of. And I don't think that's any different for video games. The truly great games are those that either allow you to get so caught up in the story and world that you just always want to keep coming back, or those that have such great mechanics that you don't want to put the controller down. I'm not trying to say that this isn't the case for modern games. It absolutely is. I got absolutely sucked into the world of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and the out-of-nowhere success of games like Baldur's Gate 3 or Dave the Diver proves that great games and great storytelling aren't just relegated to retro games. But while these newer examples certainly stand out in my mind, they do tend to get lost in the sea of free-to-play, gotcha, loot box-filled games that flood the market today. I think what appeals the most about retro games is their simplicity. You simply buy the game and play the game, and experience whatever story or mechanics the designer wants you to experience. There's no marketplace to get cool skins for insanely exorbitant prices, or the dichotomy between players who can afford the cool, shiny stuff and those who can't. Instead, you're just playing the game, and the most competitive that it gets is between you and the people you voluntarily engage with, not every player in the game. On top of that, I think there's a lot to be said for the experiences you can pick up and play a bit at a time. And there's an argument to be made that you can do this more nowadays, with manual save states being almost universal. And I think that's fair. Though I think the way most people are playing retro games is through emulation, given how difficult and expensive it is to play most of them like they were originally played. So that alone adds a number of more modern quality of life changes that genuinely do improve the game. But more importantly, I think it's the way these games are designed that makes them so great. The designers were focused on making a good game because that's what they were sold on, not how much money you could extract from the player after an already hefty purchase. For the most part, and this by no means applies to all retro games, but for the most part, thanks to the years they have been out, The really great retro games have kind of floated to the surface. The ones people remember and play today are those that are focused on making a fun and engaging experience, not those that tried to squeeze your wallet for all it was worth. Now this brings me to my recommendations and my personal favorites. Now don't take this as some kind of impartial review of any of these games. I love these games, and frankly, I don't think they need much of a review at this point, so I'm just going to do a bit of a roundup. So if you're new to this whole sphere, you kind of have a starting point to jump in. And you may not enjoy these games the way I do, and that's totally cool. Feel free to discuss just how wrong I am in the comments. It's great for engagement. The first game on my personal list is Tetris, the OG Game Boy version. Now, I talked a little bit about this already in my Game Boy video, but honestly, I think it's peak Tetris. I've briefly tried some other more modern takes on the classic, but I keep coming back to the original Game Boy. It's just so charmingly simple, and honestly, one of the main things I love about it is that it doesn't have save states, which means I don't have to worry about finishing the game that I started, because I'm not even trying for a high score. If I need to stop and do something in the middle of the game, I can, and not feel bad about starting over, because the gameplay itself is just so intrinsically satisfying. The simple stacking mechanics make it incredibly satisfying to just play endlessly. It is one of the few games that I can continue to come back to time and time again and just play for about 30 minutes straight and not even realize how long I've been playing. It's honestly the perfect cozy game for me, and I can't recommend it enough. The next game I would recommend is Mario. I know, hot take, Mario is good actually. Not the NES version, but the Game Boy Color Deluxe version. I think more than almost any other game, Mario fits the handheld experience perfectly. The lack of complicated button combinations and deceptively simple gameplay make for an amazingly fun time if you just need to kill 15-30 minutes in a car ride or train. And honestly, I would recommend pretty much any of the 2D Mario series. For the most part, they all build off each other and the formula, fine-tuning it and making it more enjoyable with every entry. Now there are obviously things I would change or add, and I would love to see something official take the form of more like a Mario flashback or something similar, but for now we're just focusing on the retro stuff, and I personally think they still totally hold up. Now, let's talk about Pokemon. Yeah, I know, you've all heard of Pokemon, and know how beloved the series is. So I won't spend too much on this point, but as far as the handheld experience is concerned, not many games are quite like Pokemon, at least quite like old Pokemon. It's a great little world to get caught up in, and obviously the main appeal, all the Pokemon you can collect, make for a really fun experience over a long period of time. But even if you're just playing for 30-minute stints here or there, you can still rack up a pretty great variety of Pokemon. And if you're not into the more action-focused gameplay of Mario, this is perfect because the turn-based combat style allows you to have a lot more time to think through your moves and think about what you want to do. Now, turn-based stuff is not really for me. It's not generally the genre that I go to, but I think Pokemon hits a pretty good sweet spot between complicated and just get me through the battle, because I think Pokemon really knows what its appeal is, and it knows that its appeal really isn't necessarily, for a lot of people anyway, in the actual combat and the difficulty of the combat. It's really more in collecting all the different Pokemon and training them and seeing them get better and evolve and all that. So I think it's a pretty good starting point if you're not super into the more quick reaction focused titles like Mario, but you're still looking for a good handheld experience that you can play whenever you have 30 minutes here or there. Okay, now it's time for what are probably my two favorite games on any retro handheld console: Link's Awakening and the Minish Cap. Earlier, we talked about how gaming for many people is an escape from their everyday life and the world we live in, and these two games serve that desire masterfully. Both have incredibly fun and whimsical worlds to dive into and have all kinds of adventures in. I also think they're some of the more impressive games available on retro handhelds, as they're able to offer colorful, expansive, sprawling open worlds right in your pocket. Now yes, I know, compared to Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, these games are pretty small and uncomplicated. Though I also think that's kind of a strength of theirs. Well, don't get me wrong, I love the openness that Tears of the Kingdom's Ultra Hand abilities give to the player. I also think there is a lot to be said for a more linear, while still open experience you can get with these two amazing games. And on top of that, who wouldn't want to be a little elf boy running around the forest, talking to interesting and strange people and creatures? It's probably one of the most unique game franchises available today, and at least for me, nothing quite seems to be able to do what the Legend of Zelda franchise can. All in all, I think these are two games that exemplify what makes this franchise so amazing. And they're made to be convenient and fun to play on the go, which just adds to the appeal of these games, as their little adventures can be squeezed into your schedule wherever they might fit. I think the point I'm trying to make isn't that old video games are better, just that I prefer games where I don't have to, 1, interact with other people to play and have a good time, and 2, have some insane action movie experience and get all hopped up on adrenaline. Now, that can be good every once in a while, and I am known to partake in the occasional Call of Duty, though I am personally at a time in my life when I do prefer a much more slow-paced and cozy experience. And that's often found in older games, but importantly, can and often is found in indie games. This video has tended toward focusing on AAA games that were made 20 or 30 years ago, but there are so many great games in the same vein that are being made today. So if you don't personally enjoy or desire the pixel art or low poly style that's offered by retro games, there are so many beautifully detailed and polished games made by really talented indie game developers to check out. And I think that might be the next video I do, highlighting some of my favorites in that area. So look forward to that video coming soon. But as far as retro games go, I think for many people like me who don't necessarily have all the time they would like to play the newest 100+ hour open world RPG, retro games let us still indulge in the escapism offered by video games and let us still participate in the culture while not feeling like if we can't sit down for more than 30 minutes to play before having to get back to work, that we haven't made any meaningful progress in the game, or haven't fully experienced the game the way it was intended. And a lot of that comes from the nature of these games. They were made to be played in relatively short sittings, and for the most part, don't punish you for having to get up and go in the middle. So yeah, ultimately, I just wanted to gush a bit about these games and have a think about why it is that I like them so much and why I keep coming back to them, even in the ever-growing world of modern games. But what do you think? Do you feel similarly to me about retro games, or am I crazy and just need to get with the times? Either way, I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I would love to hear from you in the comments about your favorite games you're playing right now. Thank you so much for watching. I know you didn't have to. Have a good day, and happy gaming.